Welcome to another episode of the Neoliberal Realm podcast. I'm Ronaldo McKenzie, your host, producer, and creator. This episode of the Neoliberal Realm podcast is the final episode of the Caribbean Thought lecture series that is delivered at the Jamaica Theological Seminary via the Zoom platform. The Caribbean Thought lecture series is actually a class at the Jamaica Theological Seminary with an exam at the end. Students are drawn from all over the world and are involved in a semester-long academic course which explores issues that involve post-colonialism, Caribbean political theory, and globalization. And of course, the main text is Neoliberalism, Globalization, Income Inequality, and Poverty, which explores the dynamics of post-independent Jamaica and the Caribbean, looking at the dynamics of resistance and the socio-political issues that has come to create the realities of the Caribbean today. Today's lecture, again, is the final lecture, and it is a review of the entire summer, and not only summer, but also today, this particular episode marks the final lecture because the lecture series started in January with semester 2, which was the spring semester, and then of course we had the summer semester, which started in June, and culminates today with an exam on August 16. We have made the lectures available so as to facilitate, so as to provide and to facilitate access to collegiate education, which is part of what we're about at the Neoliberal Corporation, because we are aimed at serving the world today to solve tomorrow's challenges by making popular what was the monopoly. So coming up is the final lecture where yours truly, myself, who is the professor of the class, discuss and review the course and some important concepts. It promises to be quite interesting. Please email us at the neoliberalround@ronaldocmckenzie.com. Here we go. Learning should be memorable. And if you make it memorable, then you will, and you apply learning strategies. I believe I was working with a student who attended another college, and we were looking at learning strategies. I wrote a short blog about learning strategies, and I actually did a podcast about learning strategies and the plan and about student success. In fact, the study was done. Studies, you can find studies going way back to the 1970s, 80s, and even before that, looks at learning strategies. But even as we go into the 2000s and people start to rethink and we start to think critically about things, and people start to apply critical thinking, not just to political and socio-political issues and historical issues, but even to learning, how we learn. And with the changes in technology, which also affect society and people, then, and even the ideas about how we think about society, we don't think about living in a male-dominated society anymore. We are as a society, the Caribbean, in the U.S. and the world, and it's in the Western world. We're moving towards diversity, equity, and inclusion. We've always been talking about that, but especially since the rise in the Me Too movement and so on. And then lately, lately the U.S. have been, and with the rise in populism from 2016, there are those who are challenging diversity, equity, and inclusion. In the U.S., we see the affirmative action being challenged. We see various courts and various states are trying to get rid of
institutions that have policies that embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion recently. But generally, there's been a move towards diversity, equity, and inclusion. And part of the backlash and some of the policy shifts, which in a sense, that's going back to what we used to have, is the fact that the status quo, conservatives, traditionalists, there is always a backlash by conservatives, traditionalists, or the status quo, a backlash against their rule, against their dominance, against their privilege. And that's always the case. And you find that kind of backlash because there's a backlash because it threatens their position. Diversity, equity, and inclusion provides more access. And when there's more access, it means it limits monopolies. Yes, it prevents those from dominance. So there has been a backlash, especially when some time ago I spoke with you guys about what happened in 2009. From 2009, there had been a study exploring demographical changes in the US and the Americas, especially in the US, and which these demographical changes may affect policy decisions, which also affect islands of the Caribbean and countries. So when you study Caribbean thought, when you do Caribbean studies, you cannot divorce it from what's going on geopolitically in the world. It's a course that considers geopolitical issues, because if we are studying Caribbean or we're doing Caribbean thought, and with it is critical thinking, and we have said at the outset that the Caribbean is an invention, and no one can deny that. There is no argument denied that the Caribbean as we have today is an invention. Which is made up of people who we call them hybridized people. Hybrid because it's a mixture when you start to study Caribbean and the peoples and and I said to you, if you were to look at if we did not have European influence in the Caribbean today, would the Caribbean look or resemble what it looks like today? Of course not, probably not. Okay. However, whatever the case is, I'm saying to you that there is always a drive to mitigate and to minimize attack against the status quo, attack against society, attack against culture, attack, okay? And so therefore, when you start to study Caribbean and looking at, fine, we are an invention of the Caribbean, but it's the inventing of the Caribbean. This is the bad thing. The Caribbean today, as it is today, is it invented? It's an invention, but why would we need to explore the Caribbean critically in order to go forward? What is wrong with the Caribbean being an invention? And of course, if you start to study the Caribbeans, when you start to look at the Caribbean, its invention and its position in the world, or when you start to study the dynamics of society, because part of studying Caribbean, part of studying societies, you're studying the dynamics in terms of the relationship between peoples inside of within the society and those external to the society. When you look at the Caribbean today, we talk about structural adjustment and how structural adjustment has created the dependencies we have in the world. Okay, debt. The debt, how has created debt. What goes on politically and economically, the economics and the politics can affect the country. The religion and philosophy can affect the culture and the peoples as well. I interviewed Shelley Ann Fraser, who is the executive director for the Herflow Foundation. She talks about how religion plays a role in her efforts to help to address period poverty, where period poverty is a situation where in some countries, women and girls don't have the resources in order to protect themselves against their changing menstrual cycles. And as a result, they don't go to school. And that affects their education. It affects their poverty and their inability to raise their educational levels in order to develop the competitive currencies in the world. So, yeah, so we find how religion plays a role because we live in a very dominant masculine society. The conversations that we need to have around ending period poverty, we won't have those. There is always a backlash. There's from the traditionalists, from the church or whatever, because of the male-dominated society we live in. So it's very important that we study. So the point I'm talking about, we talk diversity, equity, and inclusion. Learning is changing in the world. And so coupled with all of the changes happening in over time, because I'm talking about how learning is changing, and we don't see and from I went to Jamaica Theological Seminary from 1999 to 2003, and in 2002 to 2003 I did a course called Learning Theories, and from that time when I was reading about learning and how people learn, or learning theories, we have been, one of the things that we've been talking about in learning theories is how learning happens. Learning doesn't happen in a vacuum. Learning, and by when we talk about in a vacuum, in other words, in isolation of all that's happening in society, okay? Say, for example, I say to people, when you study societies, you have to study the dynamics of society. You have to go, you can't, say for example, the immigration issue. The challenges in immigration cannot be, you are going to have a solution that does not deal effectively with immigration if you do not study the history that has created illegal immigration. And that has exacerbated the issue, okay? And then of course, when you start to look at study who are the people who are illegally leaving their countries to come to other countries, okay, illegally, that is, and the problem of immigration is illegal immigration, and part of that problem is majority of the people who are crossing the border illegally are poor people, okay. And when you start to study brain drain, and when you start, and who gets to travel, so on and so forth, and how structural adjustment policies and neoliberal globalization that where global South countries have to open up their economies, and they open up their economies, now they are competing with first world countries. That has helped to kill their economies, okay, which has created the kind of movement. And then again, of course, who gets to travel? You have to have ties. You have to be connected, so on and so forth. You know, these are some of the things when you start to study the immigration. So you don't study things so learning cannot happen in a vacuum. Say, for example, someone made a point recently, and I'm going to share the point, and I tweeted something about it. Someone made a point recently on Twitter. Point was, you ever notice that Biden supporters never post anything pro-Biden? It's all just anti-Trump. So I responded by saying, not necessarily. That generalization or a conclusion based on inductive logic. And I believe you guys are familiar with the study of logic. Logic is one of the branches of philosophy, and logic involves reasoning, and a way of arriving at truth, in a sense. And there is inductive logic and there is deductive logic, okay? And so what I said that not necessarily that conclusion is a generalization based on inductive logic, where you use instances that are known to you to make your conclusion. However, there are Biden supporters who we've spoken to, who have done the opposite of what you've experienced, okay? And that's one of the, so as much as we have the means and ways to arrive at truth, it's still not clear cut, because the human method of arriving at truth is still flawed, okay? It's still flawed. And there's always ways around it. So I said to you, so we learn in learning theories, you go to the learning, when you approach learning, It's not an empty jug. You guys, you students should not. You guys aren't empty. You don't come to the learning process. You don't come to the class as tabula rasas, a blank slate. Okay, you tabula rasas. You come to the learning process as human beings, as Homo sapiens who already have achieved Homo erectus. You come as evolutionary beings who are able to think, who have access to resources now in the 21st century. You have access to resources, okay, that will help to support and aid your learning. And not only that, you are collegiate students, so you already have gone through some kind of rigors of learning. So therefore, we talk about sequencing when you learn, sequencing. When you learn something, one of the ways, when you make it memorable is when you learn a new idea, or you're being introduced an idea that you are not on top of and readily exposed to. That doesn't necessarily mean that you don't come with information and some knowledge. You still come with knowledge. You still come with it. The professor cannot then be, as a human being, cannot be seen as just the arbiter of truth. Professor, okay, now we think of teaching and the teachers as facilitators. Teachers are facilitators, okay? We are moving away from this idea of teachers being the arbiters of truth and people who don't make any mistakes. Teachers make mistakes. They're human beings. Yes, they are at a different level, but you guys come with something. You have stuff. Not only that, I'm against privilege. I'm against privilege, like Gramsci, privileging education. Okay, so you come to the process with stuff. So you, and not only that, you have intellectual faculties that provide, and you have technological resources now where you can use your faculties to get information, and you also have memory. You can remember, or you can compare and contrast. And that's how you learn. You're reading, I'm like, oh, I remember I did this in class. This speaks to this issue. I'm talking about Caribbean thought, and I'm talking about tabula rasa. What does tabula rasa have to do with it? What does learning? Everything, learning is interdisciplinary because life is complex and things are tight. So when you come to the learning process, I said to you, we are moving towards a very inclusive society. So therefore, learning should be inclusive. Okay, learning is diverse, it's equitable. So you come to the process not as tabula rasa, but as intelligent beings. So and you make learning memorable by when you are engaged with the learning process. Engage with it, and you engage with it not by remembering all these theoretical concepts, but when you apply these concepts and these ideas and points to what is actually taking place in your own lives, in your own community, and in the world. Okay, that is why I invite you to engage with what's going on. Read the papers, read the news, and engage with what's going on in the world. Today's class is a final class. I will be reviewing some very important points, but there are some things. There's one thing that we didn't get to that I didn't get to finish. Hopefully I get to finish it today. But just so you know, there's something major that's happening in Jamaica. Recently, there is a media press release. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this. What do you guys feel about Jamaica releasing this press release? The government of Jamaica has officially taken the decision to recognize the state of Palestine. And I'm going to read it. I think the government of Jamaica, and this is the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, on April 23, 2024. By the way, let me ensure that I'm recording. Are we recording? Yes, we are. Released a statement entitled "Jamaica recognizes Palestine as a state," and the media and the release reads thus, and I quote: "The government of Jamaica has taken the decision to recognize the state of Palestine. The decision was confirmed by Senator the Honorable Kamina Johnson Smith, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, following deliberations of the cabinet on Monday, April 22. Minister Johnson Smith advised that Jamaica continues to advocate for a two-state solution as the only viable option to resolve the long-standing conflict, guarantee the security of Israel, and uphold the dignity and rights of Palestinians. By recognizing the state of Palestine, Jamaica strengthens its advocacy towards a peaceful solution. In commenting on the decision, she said that the decision is aligned with Jamaica's strong commitment to the principles of the Charter of the United States, which seek to engender mutual respect and peaceful coexistence among states, as well as the recognition of the rights of people to self-determination. Minister Johnson Smith provided further context for the decision by reiterating Jamaica's concerns regarding the war in Gaza and the ever-deepening humanitarian crisis, together with the government's advocacy for a peaceful resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict through diplomatic dialogue rather than military actions. The foreign minister reaffirmed Jamaica's support for an immediate ceasefire and the release of hostages and increased access to humanitarian aid for the people of Gaza, especially the many women and children who are suffering daily. She stated that Jamaica continues to support all efforts for de-escalation and the establishment of lasting peace in the region, imploring all parties to consider the dire consequences of further conflict and commit to diplomatic solutions, ensuring the safety and sovereignty of all. Jamaica now joins the 140 member states of the United Nations who have recognized the state of Palestine. Now, what do you guys think about that? Do you think it is within Jamaica's interest to make such a bold comment?
For me, honestly, sir, I think where that matter is concerned, I think they should have kept their mouths shut. But based on the question that you asked, I think that they think that it was within their interest to make that statement, and on that basis, that's why they did it. Because in terms of on a global stage, in terms of how we are viewed by other countries, we are small fries. So whether or not we think that the sky is blue or purple is really of no consequence to that many people.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. So you said because we are a small, vulnerable country, then we do not have the power. I don't
think based on just to see how, even when you think about when we had watched Life and Death, for instance, how we are viewed internationally by other countries, apart from the way that people esteem us in terms of vibes.
Yeah.
People don't really value Jamaica. What? There doesn't seem to be much respect internationally, if you get what I'm saying. Other than, for instance, who is right there hanging behind you, Bob Marley, or athletes or something. So it's like, for me, I think that the government would have done that because it would have been in the best interest of the country to do so. Granted, I don't necessarily have all of the information, but so for
me,
I
mean, that's a good one. The question I would ask, you said, whether or not we make a public statement, it doesn't really move or shift the needle forward or backward, because we're a very small country with very little military power, very little economic power, political power in the world. That's the point you're making. So why would it? But how does it benefit us to?
That is it. But that is it now.
Or how does it benefit the people, the Palestinian people? What difference does that make?
And that is it. I don't think it will make a difference for them. I think, oh gosh, you guys sound away now.
Yeah.
I don't think the motive was for. I don't think it was said with their interest in mind. I'm going to be very honest.
Okay. What about First of all, one of the questions I asked is, what is the relationship between Israel and Jamaica, or the U.S. and Jamaica, and what about what of that? I mean, Barack Obama did this some time ago. I think it was 2016 or before that. No, not 2016, 2014 or earlier. Early in his presidency, made a bold statement advocating for the Palestinian people. The same kind of advocacy that the Jamaican government did, he advocating for the Palestinians. But do you think that Jamaica's position, public statement, can also affect the relationship that we have with the U.S. or with Israel, especially now a war is happening right now? Do you think that can affect us in any way? And do you think that that has always been the challenge of the Caribbean, the fact that we are thermometers and not thermostats in the world?
That part.
Naturally, sir.
Yes. Because I mean, say for example, don't you believe that we have a responsibility to also advocate for other peoples in the world? But you're saying our side, so maybe we should do it as a Caribbean, as CARICOM have done it. Maybe not necessarily Jamaica.
Well,
and why would they have waited until now? Because the war, the Palestine, I mean, this been going on from a very long time. Why did they wait until now? Is it that because we don't necessarily rely on international aid as much as we do?
okay.
Yeah.
Can I make a weird comparison?
And by the way, I did reach out to the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade asking for an interview because I would love to ask these questions. But go ahead.
For me, I want to make a comparison. Because in terms of, for instance, when you think about apartheid, let's go there.
Yes.
Jamaica had a very big voice in terms of speaking out against the apartheid that was happening, and almost in a sense shone a light on like, hello, what we doing? That can't be right. And that sort of a thing. But I think that one was different because it was racial.
Yeah.
In terms of this is big wig against big wig. Influence against influence.
Yeah.
And so it's
But I think Jamaica did it now because Jamaica, we could have done it a long time ago. Why did they wait till now? I think because more and more people, I think 140 countries, they joined 140 other countries who have already signed. And I think this is important for Jamaica. When Haiti became independent, the world did not recognize Haiti's independence. But now we have countries and black countries and independent countries that can now recognize their independence. So in a sense, we all have to work together to bring about change. And I believe that those who are calling for the destruction of Palestine as a state, and there are people who don't recognize the Palestinian state. Israel does not recognize the Palestinian state, and they are at war with them. That's part of the problem. I believe part of social action and social justice and advocacy is about individuals and countries and institutions coming together to advocate for change. So if countries can come together, and then I think they'll be able to apply more pressure. And not only that, I think Jamaica has to know, Jamaica is trying to become a major player in the world. When a country is trying to become a major player in the world, then they make bold statements like this. And I have always argued that the Caribbean and Jamaican and global South countries and small states, they have to become major players in the world, not just in terms of what they practice, but what they preach, and they have to also get involved in international affairs. I believe that countries have a responsibility. Jamaica has a responsibility, for example. But I have also said, fine, you're advocating for Palestine. What's going on in Haiti? Are you advocating for Haiti? Right now, Haiti is right now we are petitioning for a Haitian-led solution, because even right now in Haiti, just so you know, the Prime Minister of Haiti has resigned. He stepped down yesterday. Day before yesterday, I sent 2 days ago, I wrote to Andrew Holness via social media, and also sent messages to the Minister of Foreign Affairs and so on. I said, yes, you had made a public statement about Palestine, but what's going on in Haiti, in terms of the fact that the people of Haiti have their own constitution, and we are partnering with the US to snub their own constitution. And you notice what they charted, you notice what the statement says, that we promote self-determination. The people must have the right to self-determine. And Israel is saying, okay, we will give you your independence, we will leave you alone, but only if you elect or identify a leadership that we approve of. Okay, that is anti-self-determination. That is anti-independence. That's anti-freedom. In other words, a country will only recognize another country if that country acquiesces to my ideas about politics and economics. Okay, in other words, so that is what Israel is saying to Palestine. So, and I had boldly made a statement about that. I posted about that. I wrote about that. So recently, the Dominican government responded saying, "Well, you know, we are for Haiti. Israel. But what about Haiti? If Jamaica believes in sovereignty and nationhood and statehood, and in the constitutional rights of countries, why is it that we are not promoting and so public about advocating for a Haitian-led solution? We jump past Haiti and talk about Palestine. What's going on in Haiti today? What's going on in Cuba? And the fact that America has a long-standing embargo against Cuba because of its economic position. Yet Cuba has the right to self-determine. Yes? So part of my question is, if that is the Jamaican position, why isn't that the same position? And why aren't we of Jamaica? And why aren't we making a public statement asking for a Haitian-led solution, asking that Haiti, Canada, France, Germany, and the countries that the external gang of 5 or 4 countries outside of Haiti that controls Haiti, why is it that control Haiti? Why is it CARICOM putting out a public statement saying we are against foreign interference of Haiti, and the Haitians should follow their constitutions, and we are willing to provide the resources that the Haitians need and the authorities need in order that they follow their constitution. Is that the oldest member of the Supreme Court should be the interim leader of the country and help to steer the country towards an election where they can elect new leadership. Okay. Anyway, yes, Alisa.
Sir, I was just gonna draw a line between what you just expressed and what it is that I had said, because what immediately came back to mind was the fact that the news article, I remember the news article that came out about Canada sending troops to train Jamaicans to help to quell all the tension that is happening in Haiti. So for me, it's not even, we profess these things, and yes, we say that we care, But there is a motive behind the concern that does not speak to genuine concern for anybody else. It speaks to I do this so I can get this. I say this so I can have this. And not a genuine concern for anybody else, because it cannot be that. It does not make sense for literally your closest neighbors to be in need, and it's as if they don't exist.
That
As
is true.
people who are on an entirely different hemisphere, who you don't know anything about them, which part them come from, you can't even assess yourself where the beginning of this war took place. It's selfish.
Well, I think
You sure about that? Sorry, you sure about that? Jamaica is not where it doesn't have a history with Israel, and there isn't any long-standing benefit. There isn't
No,
any
meaning no.
favors.
I am not saying.
Oh, okay.
I'm not talking about Jamaica's history with Israel. I am
Okay.
speaking about the relationship between Israel and Palestine and that sort of a thing. That's what I am talking about. That we ourselves probably don't even necessarily fully understand the depth of what is happening there.
this is interesting. Jamaica is supposed to be a Christian country,
Mhm.
a very traditional conservative Christian country. And the kind of Christianity we have is one that promotes the biblical Christian biblical theology understanding of Israel.
Mhm.
And so it's quite interesting that Jamaica has taken the step, knowing that, of course, unless
It's not quite interesting, sir. It is important Jamaica take the stance, because guess what? Because of the long-standing issue with because we know that if Israel and Palestine go at war, the entire world is affected.
But no,
So
my question, that's good. But what about but Israel but there are those who believe that Palestine shouldn't be a state, and there are those who use the Bible to say that Israel it was promised that Israel would be reinstated again. Israel, okay, one. And there are those who believe that this Israel is not necessarily physical Israel. They're talking about the future Israel as a people. And there are those who maybe the idea of Israel. And there are those who believe that when talking about Israel coming back again, there are those who speak to the utopic society. The new vision. So, but anyway, whatever the case is, there are those who believe that who believe that Israel is the promised people and the promised land and so on and so forth. So this is really an interesting time in term. And then of course this Jamaican government policy is quite interesting, because they are also introducing policy to explore Obia. So it's quite interesting, Obia, and the church is against that. So it's quite interesting. I would love to look at what's going on in terms of politics in Jamaica today, the Jamaica Labour Party and their political, not just the Jamaica Labour Party and the policies that they are embarking on now, and their conservative or liberal stance. It seems as if that the Jamaica Labour Party is lately have been promoting a lot of liberal policies, while and over the last couple of years. That's quite interesting. What do you guys have to say about that?
About which part, sir?
About the Jamaican Labour Party over the past couple of years have been introducing a lot of policies which seem to be very liberal and not necessarily conservative or traditional.
America sneezed, sir. That's what happened.
Yes. Okay. This is quite interesting, but we're going to table that for now. So that's what's happening in the world. That's for something for you guys to think about. And please remember, this class we talk about the importance of self-determination, which is very important. We talk about nationhood, statehood, or nationalism. But we're going to table that. We'll stop right there as it relates to that. But today's class, I want to spend some time today to talk about several things. I want to there's so many things I want to do today, to be honest. Should I do this? Okay, this is the timeline list. What is 16 pages? Okay, I'm gonna go over 16. I'm gonna take well, I won't take a break yet. I'm gonna take a break at 5:15. But I'm gonna go over a list for you, and maybe I should. Origins. Okay, I'm gonna go over this paper. So let me share my screen with you. So there's something. At what time does class finish? It's now.
Finishes at 7 o'clock your time.
So I have about. Oh, we have 2 more hours left. So 1 hour before the class, let me know, because I want to go over the quiz. Over a quiz.
Okay, as you know, we are I'm playing from a recording, so I will forward the recording, and we're going to be discussed, and it will discuss the quiz. Any questions so far? By the way, what do you guys think about Kamala Harris, the possibility of a half Jamaican or a half first generation Jamaican in terms of Kamala Harris being the presidential nominee for the Democrats, and if she wins, she would be the first ever South Asian or Indian American president. What do you guys think about that? Any thoughts?
Sir, night, sir. Sir, for me personally, sir, I care zero, sir, because it's not even really a case where I should really acknowledge our Jamaican heritage, so.
So you're saying that she does not even accept her Jamaican heritage? Why you think so? Who told you that she don't accept her Jamaican heritage?
Sir, based on me, see, she hardly talk about it. It's like, even though I don't know where her mother and her father are, I don't know a disagreement there, really.
But you
Her
know how
father wasn't in her life, though. He is the one who is Jamaican. He was not in her life. She does speak about her grandmother from Jamaica, but you won't hear her talking much about it because the Jamaican father left. She wasn't born in Jamaica, but the Jamaican father left the mother, so he was never in her life. So I think she may not have spoken about that side much, but we know about it because she says it, or she says things about her grandmother from Jamaica. But he wasn't in her life, so maybe that's why.
there are a lot of Jamaican men who there are a lot of men, especially African American men, Caribbean men, Jamaican men. I don't know. Well, not that I don't know. You are right. She's half Jamaican and half, her mom is from India. Her dad is from Jamaica. He was a professor. He was a professor here in the U.S. In fact, a professor at a top university. I think it was Stanford University, one of the top universities in the U.S. He was a professor there. But yeah, I don't think he was as involved in her life as the mom was. So probably if he was as involved in her life, maybe she would be talking more about Jamaica. So there we go, that's what's good. And I find that living in the US here, and especially even in Philadelphia, I've met so many people who they said their father, the father is Jamaican, but they've never been to Jamaica. They don't know their dad, but they hear that, or they've never met their dad. But so many people's father lived in Jamaica, but there's no connection to the Caribbean. That's a problem. I talked about the importance of immigration was supposed to be part of the escape, part of the hope, where people travel abroad And then as life become better for them, then they're supposed to make it easier for those behind them. That was always part of the Caribbean thing. The remittances, sending money back, and so, and maintaining and keeping those connections. And I know we have the Caribbean community, but many of these are institutional and organizational. And the problem with institutions and organizations, they're very bureaucratic. Okay, and they don't really they don't do what they're supposed to do, and that is to maintain and to preserve and to extend and expand connections and so on and so forth. And so I believe if diasporan organizations like such as the Caribbean community all over the world and so on, if they were more organized in terms, and they were not as institutional, then probably and focus on helping to maintain Jamaican heritage amongst the generation, because there's generational divide. You have people you have first generation, second generation Jamaicans, St. Lucians or Caribbean people who are far removed. Well, they're second generation, third generation, but they're already far removed from Jamaica. They have no connections. That is a loss. That is a loss in some instances, I believe. And we are seeing it play out with this president, with this vice president who is about to be president. And I say many Jamaicans might be saying, well, she's not even mentioning she's from Jamaica. Well, the amount of mention she's giving Jamaica is the amount of investment that Jamaica has made. Many years ago, like Merlin Otti used to run for Jamaica, and she stopped running for Jamaica because Jamaica did not provide the kind of investment, the ways that we thought Jamaica was investing, but Jamaica wasn't really investing in their runners, really. Back then, we had a great program, but they weren't actively investing in Jamaicans in the way that they should. And many Jamaicans, many people who should be representing Jamaica, they're not representing Jamaica because we've lost the connections. And I said to you, connections are very important. And so therefore, sometimes as people, we wait until it's too late. Or, we wait until something is happening before we throw we invest in something. Say, for example, Jamaica should have been, as a country, strategically, should have been. And I know I'm an American and I'm going to be voting, and I don't want to seem political. But I'm also Caribbean, and I'm going to make the point that we should have been supporting and investing in Kamala Harris from the get-go, and we should have better programs in terms of finding and connecting Jamaicans. First, I play tennis, and I watch tennis. I'm an avid tennis fan, very involved in tennis. And there's what's his name again? Dustin, from the guy that went to play for Germany. I think he's half Jamaican, half German, but he's always lived in Jamaica. And what was his name again? Was it Dustin Brown, I believe? And he decided to switch and started playing for Germany because Jamaica was not. I know we Jamaicans are limited by money and so on, but there is investments that come into Jamaica, and the decisions we make in terms of how we divert funding and investments is very important. We should, when we identify talent like Dustin Brown, we should have been investing in him, but he switched and went to play and represent Germany. Go ahead, Kenyatta.
Evening, sir. No, it's something that you said earlier, and kind of sits with me quite frequent.
Yeah.
And the only thing that keeps coming back to mind, the only thing that keeps coming back to mind is duty. And I've seen and I've heard lots of talks.
Yeah.
Especially when she was selected to be the VP initially. I've heard lots of talk about cultural connection and everything. And I remember I said to someone, a family member, but it's not her duty. as not in the professional sense as being the VP or anything like that, but as an individual, I don't believe that it's her duty to want to rush back to Jamaica and connect to her roots and all of that. It's not her duty, right? And I say this from experience as well because my father is Trinidadian, born, raised until he was a teenager when he moved to Jamaica. My grandfather is Kenyan. I don't talk about these things really. My grandfather is Kenyan. My grandfather moved from Kenya to the United States, 18 years old, because he had an opportunity. His mother moved away from Kenya to the United States to work as a seamstress. And then by virtue of meeting a woman, he got married and moved to Jamaica. Right?
Right.
And we have had this conversation over and over, and every time conversation come up about your roots, especially because of my name.
Barnaby, right?
No, Kenyatta.
What's your last name?
Barnaby.
But yeah, Kenyatta. Yes, your name. Oh,
yes, I have a full.
I understand why you have Kenya. Okay, I see.
I have a.
You know, let me ask you because it's quite interesting.
I have a full tribal name.
So where were you? So you were born in Jamaica.
I was born in Jamaica.
But your dad is from where?
My father is from Trinidad.
And your mom is from?
My mom is Kenyan American.
So, oh wait, wow. So you are just like, what's your name again? Kamala Harris. You are half and half, in a sense. In a sense, so you are Jamaican, yet you have roots in. But it doesn't. I have roots
in Trinidad. My father was born to a Indian and a African, native African, so he was referred to as, and that's why when your former guest was speaking and so forth, I'm like, hold on, because information like this I've gotten first-handed.
Yes.
Right? So my father has always been referred to as a Douglas.
Right.
He's mixed breed.
Yes.
And in Trinidad, that was not allowed.
Yes.
Back in the day. So when people talk about culture, for example, I have recently switched my name. Because living in Canada, they allow you to switch your name how you see fit.
Okay.
Right? And I have a full tribal name. It was coincidental that someone who is also from Kenya, one of my colleagues, found out that I have a full tribal name when she saw my driver's license. And she was like, oh, Kenyatta, why do you abandon your roots? And I was like, I wasn't born there. I've heard stories. I wasn't born in Trinidad. I heard stories. Right? I visited Trinidad many times. I've never been to Kenya.
Yeah.
Right?
You know,
go ahead, sir.
I love your response because I always say this is my famous quotation. Once you label me, you negate me. And I've oftentimes said that while culture is important, culture can be dangerous. While nationalism is important, nationalism can be dangerous. And I talk about the issue of the cosmopolitan. Who must you be? I mean, you know, you would be you should read Homi Bhabha's book, The Location of Culture, because you talk about the cosmopolitan, of which you are. You talk about the Trinidadian being the anarchist. And you have an interesting story. And I say to people, the beautiful thing about doing this course and so on is while it's very important to look at the legacy of slavery that has affected the post-colonial and talk about how the issue of identity has affected us. I've oftentimes said Franz Fanon said the black man is trapped and the white man is trapped. He's trapped because he is forced to be, the black man is forced to act inferior, and while the white man is forced to act superior, you know, in a sense. And it's Kenyatta. It's as if Kenyatta or Kamala Kamala, what I can't pronounce her name still.
Kamala,
thank you, is forced to be.
Yeah, we're forcing her to identify
As if you're being
with
forced
a
to accept
culture
a
where she
particular
may not want
identity.
to be.
As if you cannot, right? And that's one of the problem of culture as well, because you have, you have some people who may be within a particular context or geography or identify with something geographically, but that does not necessarily should speak to someone's identity or personality and so on. Personality and individualism should transcend that. Wow, I wish.
But sir, all right, let me, for
Go ahead.
example, I've been forced, in my opinion, and this is my word, I've been forced to learn about my Kenyan roots because of my name. And one of the reasons
I like how you use the word. Very good.
And I'm not afraid to share why I switched my name around. So I go by my middle name in the Jamaican context for persons to understand. I go by my middle name. So I took my middle name as my first name, and then I pushed my first name as my middle name. Why? So, and you probably will understand this more. In Kenya, the name Kenyatta is associated with one of the most powerful families there. They own more than 3/4 of properties there. I've had instances where I've said my name and I've had persons in the room stand to acknowledge me. And the first time this happened to me, I said, "What is this about?" And they were like, "No, we understand the type of work that you do and why you're so involved working with marginalized groups. Because you're a member of this family." And I said, "I don't know what you're talking about." And they were like, "So you don't know the origin of your name?" "No, my grandfather just gave me the name." "Why you speak like that?" "How do I speak?" "You don't sound Kenyan." "That's because I'm not Kenyan, I'm Jamaican." They were like, "Well, you have roots in," "But yes, so like, what you are." I'm like, no, hold on. I identify with the country where I was born based on my birth certificate and where I attended school and the culture that I learned and grew up in. That's where I identify with, right? And I've started just really using the term duty. Like I'll say to the person, it is not my duty personally. It is not my duty to want to learn about anywhere my parents came from. I know where they're from, but I don't need to go digging up a rabbit hole trying to find out anything more. So and like the whole thing with her running for president and all of that, I'm like, we are seeing let's stop focusing on the culture. The cultural part of it is important, but let's not turn her identity in a cultural thing. Right, let's not turn her identity as a woman, as someone who is running for president. Like I'm even seeing this whole conversation online about her being a woman and not having children. How can she be running for president?
Talking about that, yes. But this is
Right.
good.
And I'm not going to like piss me off. Someone like I'm actually having a conversation like back and forth on Twitter now with someone. Because they're like, "Oh, but this and that." And I'm like, "But do you have a child?" "No," then shut the hell up. So I have to be careful. Like, it's not our duty.
Discriminatory world where people people shouldn't be discriminated. That's a discriminatory language, but now they're trying to fix it up. It's what J.D. Vance, the vice presidential nominee, running mate of President Trump, who actually started the conversation. But now they're trying to twist it up. But let's just continue. But great, this is good. This is good conversation. Thank you so much for contributing those thoughts. I'm going to push forward in this.
Okay. So let me share my screen with you. Oops. Share screen. What the Europeans were trying to do, their project. Forced labor systems, those were the influence, were brought to the region to work on plantations, leading to significant demographic and cultural changes. Of course, this period marks tremendous influence for European colonial powers, There's also if African cultural heritage.
You guys get a copy of the timeline I sent you, because I updated the timeline. And I'm going to actually go straight to the exam, which is, here we go. Is this it? All right. But before I do that, let me stop sharing my screen for a second, because I also want to share another timeline with you guys. So this is a timeline, Caribbean Thought summer class. This is the timeline list. What is the Caribbean and who determines this? There's a timeline in chronological order of Caribbean history with, excuse me, all the events and notable figures included. Prior to 1490s, the Caribbean region was inhabited by nomadic, and you know what I mean by nomadic. Nomad are people that travel from place to place. Inhabited man, so the Caribs or the Amerindians or the Taino people were largely described as nomadic, such as the Arawakan Taino, who lived in small groups and traveled along the coastline and across the Americas. They were largely peaceful with minimal combat skills and tools for fighting wars. We need to also include, I need to also add to this that African sailors traveled to the Caribbean. Prior to Columbus. Okay. Whatever. So that's before the 1490s. Into 1492 to 1493, Christopher Columbus arrived in the Caribbean, bringing European knowledge, religion, and people. His ulterior motive included the pursuit of gold. It's also for profit, for greed, satisfy greed, and for international competition. The international competition for capital. The European princes, Spain, France, England, the Dutch, they were all Netherlands, they were all Italy, they were all, well, more so, well, Italy was not so much, but they were all competing. The 1500s to the 1800s marked the Atlantic slave trade, which brought enslaved Africans to the Caribbean. Notice they brought, prior to the 1500s, Africans came to the Caribbean, but they weren't enslaved Africans who came to the Caribbean. It wasn't until the 1500s to the 1800s where you have the transatlantic slave trade, where you saw Africans coming here as slaves to work on sugar plantations, which transforming the region into a sugar plantation society. 1600s to 1700s marked the rise of heroes and Maroons. Maroons are escaped slaves who formed independent communities resisting colonial powers, especially when during the Spanish-British War in the West Indies, and a lot of the smaller colonies like Barbados and even Jamaica, and many of them weren't manned and protected by the Spanish crown because they didn't think that those islands were profitable, and they were more focused on North America and more profitable, what they think was profitable. So that is why it was so easy for the British to invade and to defeat the Spanish in some of these small colonies, which was to the detriment of the Spanish, because by the time because the British found out that they could utilize the West Indies as a major port to cultivate sugar and to ship it all over the world and to control it. They never found gold, but they found something else. And then with the transatlantic slave trade, that provided slave labor, that provided a great opportunity for them to develop and to make profits, to make gains. In the Caribbean, 1600s to the 1700s, you have the rise of heroes and maroons. You find that many of them escaped slaves who formed independent communities with resisting colonial powers. 1760s to 80s, Dutty Boukman was brought to Jamaica from Senegambia. He was believed to have been brought to Jamaica in the late 18th century, which is, I think, around the 1760s to the 1780s. He later escaped to Haiti, and he played a crucial role in the Haitian Revolution. Dutty Boukman led the first major slave revolt in Haiti on August 14, 1791. He was killed shortly after this revolt, around November 1791. And by 1791, Dutty Boukman escaped to Haiti, became a voodoo priest, and led the first major slave revolt in Haiti on August 14, 1791. And of course, he was killed in November, but he influenced Oliver Toussaint and the Haitian Revolution between 1791 to 1804, Haitian Revolution, leading to Haiti's independence and becoming the first Black republic in 1804. 1746 to 1791, Dutty Boukman, a voodoo priest from Senegambia who started Obi in Jamaica and voodoo in Haiti, could not read. He could read the Quran, and was known for his fine physique. He influenced Toussaint Louverture and the Haitian Revolution, leading to the first revolt in Haiti before being killed. I already said that. In 1807, the British Parliament abolished the transatlantic slave trade. And in 1833, the British Parliament passes the Slavery Abolition Act, which legally abolishes slavery throughout most of the British Empire, including the British West Indies. Of course, February 27, 1844, and we're going to split that up in terms of what happened. This particular section talks about Dominican Republic, the independence in the DR. Background: after Haiti gained independence from France in 1804, it occupied the eastern part of the island of Hispaniola, which is present-day Dominican Republic, in 1822. Haitian rule: Haiti ruled over the eastern part of Hispaniola from 1822 to 1844. This period was marked by tensions and resistance from Dominican nationalists who sought to break away from Haitian control. On February 27, 1844, the Dominican Republic declared independence from Haiti, led by nationalist figures such as Juan Pablo Duarte, Francisco del Rosario Sanchez, and Matias Ramon Paniola. In 1848, the abolition of slavery in the French Caribbean, 1848, and in 1850s, the Great Revivalism, including Jamaican Revivalism, a religious movement emphasizing spiritual renewal, leading to the revivalist, Jamaican revivalist movements. In November 6, 1865, the Second Dominican Republican independence. Of course, after achieving initial independence from Haiti in 1844, the Dominican Republic faced subsequent challenges, including the brief annexation by Spain between 1861 and 1865. The Spanish annexation in 1861 was due to economic and political instability. The Dominican Republic voluntarily sought annexation by Spain, hoping for stability and economic support, and relied heavily on Haiti for support. The Restoration War, Dominican nationalists, including Gregorio Luperon, initiated the Restoration War against Spanish rule in 1863. The war aimed to regain independence and sovereignty, and the re-establishment of independence on November 6, 1865, Dominican forces under Luperon's leadership successfully defeated the Spanish, marking the end of Spanish rule and reaffirming Dominican independence. Haiti's role during the first independence period, which is 1844, Haiti was the ruling authority over the eastern part of Hispaniola. The DR's Declaration of Independence ended this period of Haitian control. In 1865, marked the official notification of emancipation reaches the British West Indies. Although slavery was abolished, it wasn't, the Emancipation Act was not received in much of the British West Indies until 1865. That was when slavery was, many of the slaves who were free, that's when they officially left the plantation. So they were working from 1833 to 1865. They were freed, but yet they didn't know. But they worked all those years. Were they given reparation? Were they given financing? No. I wrote an article about that. We won't have time to go over that. 1873, abolition of slavery in the Spanish Caribbean. That's in Puerto Rico in 1873 was the abolition of Spanish Caribbean. Please remember, in the French Guiana, the abolition of slavery was what? 1848. In the Caribbean, the abolition of slavery was in the British West Indies was in 1833, but it was officially abolished in 1865. Please remember that. Late 1800s, the arrival of Jewish communities to the Caribbean. In the late 1800s, former slaves. Also in 1865, it also marked the arrival of indentured laborers from India and China. The 1800s also marked the arrival of the Jewish communities to the Caribbean. The late 1800s. Please, as you move from the late 1800s to the early part of the 1900s, please remember the Nazi Germany was attacking and killing off the Jews. So many of them were leaving, and some of them found their way to the Caribbean. Now, in the late 1800s, former slaves began working for wages as free individuals. And in the early 1900s, the anti-imperialism movements and the rise of Marxism versus imperialism in the early 1900s. The 1914 to the 1918 World War I involved many Caribbean soldiers who fought for the British Empire. Many of you didn't know that, but many Caribbean soldiers fought for the British Empire. And some of the soldiers were, yes, we're talking about Black West Indians, or West people who are part of the colony. Many of our ancestors many of the Caribbean people fought in World War I for the British. By the 1930s, the emergence of Rastafarianism. So the 1930s, you found the emergence of Rastafarianism, which is a religious and social movement originating in Jamaica. And by 1939 to 1945, you have World War II with significant Caribbean contributions to the Allied forces. World War II, again, 1939 to 1945. World War II with significant Caribbean. So again, you find Caribbean people were fought in World War I, and we also fought in World War II. In 1945, was the formation of the United Nations. Now, who was present and who was absent from that meeting in 1945? Who was present was the strongest, the former colonial masters. Okay, in fact, if you were a colony of one of these major countries like the US or Britain or France, then you would not have been at that meeting. So if any interests that you have, it was swallowed up in the interests of the US, England, France, Canada, so on and so forth. 1948, you have the University of the West Indies was established in 1948. And that was part of and that started the conversation in terms of the Caribbean as a federation. We never had a federation yet, but by 1948, we were discussing the Caribbean unity. And actually, in the prior to the Caribbean becoming independent, the Caribbean was much more things, especially the English-speaking Caribbean. We were much closer. The connections were very much more strident. But in fact, Cayman Islands was the 15th parish of Jamaica. So Jamaica had 15 parishes. Cayman Islands was one of the parishes. But anyways, in 1940, we said 1948, the University of West Indies was established. By 19, of course, we have Trinidad and Tobago have a campus, Guyana has a campus, Jamaica has a campus. So it's Barbados, Jamaica, Guyana, and some of the other islands, have satellite campuses and so on. In 1950s, the birth of reggae music. So 1930s, you have the birth of Rastafarianism started. By the 1950s, it's the birth of reggae music in Jamaica, which which has helped to influence the global music culture. But please, reggae music is quite interesting. Reggae music is the music of the Rasta, and it came about 20 years after Rastafarianism started. In the 1950s to the present, 1950s to present, you have waves of migration began, leading to a brain drain in the 1970s. So the wave of migration began in the Caribbean in the 1950s, but leading to a brain drain in the 1970s, especially with the rise of democratic socialism throughout the Caribbean and so on. 1957, they found bauxite in Jamaica, and Jamaica was growing. Jamaica's GDP was at 5.7%. Jamaica's had a relatively strong economy. In fact, not even relatively. Jamaica was growing, and it was one of the Caribbean islands that was really strong. So if in 1958 they were the West Indies Federation, they started talking about the West Indies Federation. They started talking about the West Indies Federation from before 1958, but really by 1958 they really started to discuss and discussing coming together, and they were supposed to finalize the agreement, but it was short-lived, because of the nationalist interest of many Caribbean islands, and I don't believe that it's just Jamaica. But the thing with the problem with the West Indian Federation is that the West Indian Federation was the ingenious idea of the British, the same people that were granting independence. They were the ones that were actually forming this West Indies Federation. Okay, and so in a sense, West Indies Federation, in a sense, that it still questioned the purity of our independence and freedom. But anyways, in 1959, we had the Bandung Conference. So in 1944, you had 1945, the formation of the United Nations, which many of the politically non-aligned nations were present. So by 1959, we had the Bandung Conference. You must know that word, the Bandung Conference, where Caribbean leaders joined other leaders from Asia and Africa to promote non-alignment and cooperation. So not many of the former colonized countries or countries that were still colonized, and many of them came together and had a conference with a dream of nationalist, independent, and sovereign nations. 1960, Frank Worrell became the first Black captain of the West Indies cricket team. It was which had sparked much controversy, because it wasn't, you couldn't be before the 1960s. If you were Black, you couldn't be at West Indies. You could not be a captain on the West Indies cricket team. But by 1960, all that was changing. 1959 to present, Cuban Revolution led by Fidel Castro, with ongoing political and economic impacts. Even today, you see that where Russia has a presence in the Caribbean, as a result of the strong ties between these political countries that share almost identical political system. By 1960s to 1980s, independent from many Caribbean countries became independent from colonial powers, which led to short-term prosperity for many Caribbean nations, including Jamaica. By 1970, the global oil crisis impacted the Caribbean economies. They were growing, but by 1970s, what happened? If Jamaica was growing and many Caribbean islands were growing in leaps and bounds, what happened in that by 1970 they could not withstand or mitigate or absorb the challenge from the global oil crisis? But they never had money. They have squandered and wasted the funding, and they weren't developed. All the windfall profits from from bauxite and so on, they did not convert that into meaningful investments that would help to protect, preserve, and expand the Jamaica and the Caribbean. And that is why it's very important to study history and to learn from history so that the present administrations that we have in the Caribbean don't make the same mistakes. In 1973, we had the establishment of CARICOM. And by 1974, but yet, although in 1973 CARICOM was established, we're still dealing with a CARICOM that is, well, that now that, I mean, over the last 2 years, they've been talking about strengthening CARICOM, but they've been having conversations about strengthening CARICOM over the last 10, 15 years, and it's still, so let's see what's going to happen now, what they're doing now that they haven't done many years ago. One thing that they have done is that they have adopted singular and similar policies in terms of corruption, and many of the Caribbean islands are sharing resources and professionals with each other, professionalism with each other, which is great, professional experts. But more needs to be done, especially when it comes down to Haiti and preserving and protecting Caribbean unity and Caribbean democracy. Much more can be done with that. In 1974, Maurice Bishop led a socialist government in Grenada, and by 1983 he was overthrown and killed by the very same people in Grenada. Some of them led or influenced by external forces between the CIA or Russia or the Soviets and the capitalists. Now, during the second independence period between 1865, Haiti did not have direct military involvement, just so you know. However, the historical context of Haiti's influence and proximity played a role in shaping regional dynamics and relations between the two nations. Overall, Haiti's involvement in the Dominican Republic independence movement was primarily during the period of Haitian occupation between 1822 and 44. So they helped to secure Dominica's independence from Europe as a result of their involvement in DR. And in a sense, the country was one. But after Dominican Republic sought to establish and maintain its own sovereignty through subsequent struggles and wars, then you find the countries were separated. In the 1970s, you have political rivalry in Jamaica between Michael Manley of the PNP and Edward Seago of the GLP, which could have crippled Jamaica. In fact, Jamaica could have been a Haiti. I said to people, don't think too lowly of Haiti and think you're better, because at some point in Jamaica's history, we were teetering towards that. In the 1980s to present, structural adjustment and loans applied by the IMF and International Monetary Fund and the IDB, the Inter-American Development Bank. The Caribbean in 1980s, the Caribbean ended the banana preferential agreement with the European Union and the UK. As we said, that structural adjustment was a policy under a loan agreement whereby the IMF and the World Bank lend money to Caribbean countries and developing countries as a way to help them deal with balancing their budget and serious financial issues, which was affecting their ability to meet their financial expectations and so on. So, but many of these loans what happened with the structural adjustment, that they were tied to conditions which with huge interests, which create debt and dependency, and has largely affected Caribbean development over the years since independence. In 1980s, the Caribbean ended the banana preferential agreement with the EU, UK as a result of NAFTA. The Caribbean didn't end, and I think it wasn't until I think NAFTA ended in 19. I think there was an error there. I think the preferential agreement ended in 1994. In 1994, following NAFTA, and the WTO, the World Trade Organization, which was established in the 1990s for this particular reason, I believe. In 1989, you had the fall of the USSR, which impacted Caribbean nations with socialist ties. So many countries with socialist ties were impacted, like Cuba. Venezuela is not necessarily Caribbean, but in a sense, they are within the region, and they were impacted. Many Caribbean islands were impacted. Grenada was impacted. Grenada and many other. Grenada was the socialist type, but many of the Caribbean islands were experimenting with socialism. And when USSR fell, or when Soviets were broken up, what happened was that in a sense people had said that it was the end of communism. But today you find China and Russia are rising, and you question whether or not communism had died. But then I write in my new book, no country adopted and implemented the kind of communism that Karl Marx talks about. What we have is pseudo-communism, and by pseudo I mean false or fake. So with the same thing we have with capitalism that promotes fair competition, and then I say competition is not fair under capitalism. What we have is nepotism and connectionism, which has served to preserve privilege and create more poverty and high levels of income inequality across the board. In 1994, we already said that. By the late 20th century, the effects of globalization on the Caribbean economies and societies. By the late 20th century, corruption, crime, and violence have been persistent issues across the region. In fact, some Caribbean islands that never had to deal with a lot of crime and violence, like Trinidad and Tobago, suddenly they are dealing with high levels of crime and violence. And please remember that there's a Marxist theory that's called relative deprivation that says whenever you have high levels of income inequality and poverty, you have high levels of crime and violence. And I'm wondering if the income inequality and poverty has increased in Trinidad. And if you were to check the stats, yes, income inequality and poverty has deteriorated in Trinidad and Tobago, which has also led to high levels of income inequality, crime and violence. And not only that, if you look at corruption in Trinidad, Trinidad is also struggling to has been struggling to improve in terms of their corruption perception index. In terms of the late 20th century, we said corruption, crime, and violence have been persistent issues across the region, although by the 1990s, we find, say, for example, in Jamaica, in the 2000s, Jamaica has passed an act enshrining the National Integrity Agency into law, and has been passing a lot of laws to prevent corruption. And not only that, they have also provided the blueprint throughout the Caribbean for corruption. Let's hope that this will continue, that we find many Caribbean islands are way up there in the top 10. In 1998, I apologize. This is not correct, guys. I don't know why I have this right here. I apologize. I didn't see this. I think I made a correction and I didn't move this, because it's supposed to be in JTS was established in the 1960s. The 21st century. The future of the Caribbean involves reinterpreting and potential transcendence of its historical and cultural identity with faith, culture, music, sports, science, and technology, and the brain drain contributing to its export value and global influence. What I've said, that there is a value to, there's a negative side of brain drain, but there's also a positive side of brain drain. Okay. Say, for example, brain drain has helped with Jamaica's remittances. So where we have lost in one instance, but we are gaining because Jamaica benefits heavily from monies being sent from abroad. And that is why I said to people that Jamaica continues to be, the diaspora is a very important community to Jamaica and to the economics of Jamaica, to the Caribbean. 21st century community building efforts have been haphazard and not strategically effective, but there's a growing sense of interdependence and regional cooperation throughout organizations, through organizations like CARICOM, that's working to help other Caribbean islands to become in terms of bringing them in the postmodern world, but more needs to be done. 2020, we found that we found oil in Guyana. Does that provide any lasting prospects and hopes? No, we've already discussed this because Guyana does not have the kind of technology to operate to extract the oil, and as such, they have to hire out third-party companies with the capital-intensive machinery and with the investment in order to extract the oil, and they are spending huge sums of money in terms of extracting the oil. So when they finish pay third parties for the technology to extract the oil, they're only left with 12% of the profit, which is quite unusual, and it continues to beg the question as to whether or not the Caribbean will ever be able to become prosperous and independent without depending on external forces when there are mitigating factors. And so that is what the CARICOM and the Caribbean needs to be working on now. A meaningful investment that helps that reduce their reliance on capital intensive investment or the technology from overseas. They need to work on that. 2021, Haitian president is assassinated. That's Moise. And the U.S. installs Dr. Ariel Henry against the protestations of many Haitians who believe that was an affront to their constitution and their independence, which they so gallantly fought and gained in 1804. Was it eight? What did I say? It was 1804, 1801, 1804. Haitian president is assassinated. Jamaican government announces open discussions re-abolishment of slavery in 2022. Has it been abolished? There's no indication that Jamaica has abolished it, but we know that there's open discussion. Hopefully, when we finish with our research, we can provide more. We can provide the government with the information that they need in order to make a decision. There have been natural disasters such as hurricanes, earthquakes, and volcanic eruptions have significantly impacted the Caribbean throughout. There have been continued migration from the 1950s and brain drain, with remittances becoming a significant source of income for many Caribbean communities or families. The ongoing struggle for Caribbean identity is marked by issues of conquest, poverty, inequality, and dependent capitalism between the 1970s and up to now. From the 1930s to the present, the emergence and growth of soca, calypso music, and dancehall music contributed to Caribbean cultural identity. And there are some notable figures. Of course, Fidel Castro from Cuba, Sailor James, Trinidad, Walter Rodney, Guyana, Michael Mann, Edward Seaga from Jamaica, Basdio Pande from Trinidad and Tobago, Bob Marley, Maurice Bishop from Grenada, and so on and so forth. These are some of the other people some notable figures that have contributed to Caribbean life. And that is the hopefully you guys have a copy of this. I'll send this to you. If you see this in the exam and have you just plug in the description or plug in the year, that would be great. Hopefully you guys have a copy of this. If you have, Kimura, I'm quite sure I sent you this to send to the students. If you haven't received it, that's a problem. Okay. Any comments? The last section we're gonna go the last section of this class we're gonna go over the quiz, and I will share with you the answers. But we're gonna take a quick 5 minutes break, and I will come back at 8:55. Okay.
I think studying needs to start like yesterday. That's what I think.
Okay, let me ask a question. What's the global north?
What's that, sir? What is the what?
What's the global north as against the global south? What's the global north?
What is the global norm?
The global north.
Oh, north. Oh,
Yeah. What's the
good
global?
question.
When we talk about the global north in relation to this class and as against the global south, what are we talking about? If I were to ask you, differentiate between the global
Sir.
north versus the global south, how would you answer it?
So the global north is
I'm guessing
relations to
areas
developed
in the
countries.
global north meaning areas in the country where it's more well developed, as where global south means a bit underdeveloped, not as developed as much as the global north.
I think it's the global north would be the developed countries in the north. The global south would be the developed countries in the south.
Well, the global south is usually never developed.
Okay.
Right. The global south, when we talk about language, I know we're moving away from discriminatory language. So usually we would say developed and underdeveloping or developing. First world, second world, or third world. We no longer use first world, we say global north. We no longer use developing or third world, we use global south. So if you were to say global north refers to developed and the global south refers to developing countries or third world countries. That's it. You get a full mark for that. But the global north refers to the more economically developed nations, primarily located in the northern hemisphere, characterized by industrialization, technological advancement, and higher standards of living. In contrast, the global south comprises less economically developed nations, primarily located in the southern hemisphere, facing challenges such as poverty, underdevelopment, and dependent on the global north for aid and resources. But if you were just to say the global north is the new way of referring to post-industrial countries that's usually located in the northern hemisphere, while the global south is a term that we used to refer to countries who were third world or developing or whatever. Okay, that's it. Full marks. All right, next question quickly. Democratic socialism versus dependent capitalism. Democratic socialism versus dependent capitalism. Democratic socialism advocates for a mixed economy where the means of production are owned and regulated by the state, with an emphasis on social welfare programs and democratic political systems. Again, democratic socialism advocates for a mixed economy. That's why you hear democratic socialism. You hear that? Democracy and socialism talk about a mixed system involving capitalism and socialism, or capitalism and Marxism. But socialism advocates for a mixed economy where means of production are owned and regulated by the state. Okay, the means of production are owned and with an emphasis on social welfare. And in fact, the means of production are owned and regulated not by the state, but by private enterprise, and in many cases operating as quasi-government industries. And then with an emphasis on social welfare programs and democratic political system, but the social welfare programs are, say for example, transportation, education, and so on. That's owned and regulated by the state. Jamaica has a in a sense, they said in a sense it's a mixed economy, democratic socialist economy. But there are those who believe that we're a dependent capitalist country. But what is dependent capitalism? Dependent capitalism, on the other hand, refers to a form of capitalism in which a country's economy is heavily reliant on foreign investment, technology, and expertise, often resulting in limited economic sovereignty and perpetuating dependency on external actors. And I am saying that Jamaica and many Caribbean countries today are dependent capitalist states. Okay, I've said that. They're dependent capitalist states. A form of capitalism in which the country's economy is heavily reliant on foreign investment. That's true of Jamaica. Foreign technology. That's true of Jamaica and the Caribbean. And utilize a lot of foreign expertise, often resulting in limited economic sovereignty and perpetuating dependency on external actors. That is a dependent capitalist state. Democratic socialism is a mixed economy, like what they have in Cuba, where the means of production are owned and regulated by the state. That's democratic socialism. Okay? The economy is mixed. The economy is not solely owned by the state. However, it's owned and or regulated by the state with an emphasis, but the emphasis is on social welfare. So even if you have private actors owning some of the factors of production, or the responsibility or the obligation on these companies, okay, towards the government is high. That is the democratic socialist country, as against dependent capitalist countries, which is different from capitalist countries, which are not capitalist countries, post-industrial capitalist countries. All right. Now, what's the difference between capitalism and Marxism? Capitalism is an economic system based on private ownership of the means of production and the pursuit of profit through market competition. Marxism, on the other hand, derived from the works of Karl Marx. We talked about him earlier in the semester. He critiques capitalism for its inherent exploitation of the working class and advocates for a socialist society where the means of production are collectively owned and operated for the benefit of all. In fact, he wrote the book That's Capital, which is a revisionist history of Adam Smith's book, The Wealth of Nations. Okay. So that's the difference between capitalism and Marxism. Capitalism, if you want to talk, who represents capitalism? Adam Smith and Max Weber. Who represents Marxism? Karl Marx, of course. Okay. If you want to, the father of capitalism or Western style capitalism, Adam Smith. Marxism would be Karl Marx. Capitalism would be Adam Smith. Remember, capitalism is an economic system based on what? Private ownership of the factors of production, the means of production. In fact, if you are having a problem understanding or differentiating between capitalism and Marxism, just ask yourself, what is economics? Okay? What is economics? Because capitalism and Marxism are systems in economics. Economics is a principle, a science, and a study that deals with the distribution or allocation of resources in society. And the assumption in economics is that resources are limited, but wants and needs or demand are unlimited. So if resources are limited, wants, needs, and are unlimited, therefore it creates a problem. Okay. So if resources are limited, then society now have to create a distributive mechanism in order to distribute and to allocate the resources, the benefits, or whatever the case is. Some societies, which are capitalist societies or free market societies, capitalism, free market,
They are capitalist, free market. They advocate for a system whereby the factors of production are owned by private enterprise. That's capitalism. Okay, they believe that the way in which goods and services, that buyers and sellers help to transact commodities. Okay, Marxism, there's no transaction between buyers and sellers. Prices is set by the state, and the way in which goods and services or resources are distributed within Marxist society is distributed by the state. The way in which it's distributed by capitalism is by the market. And the assumption is that the market is free and it's based on the transaction that takes place in the market between buyers and sellers. That is an assumption that I'm a skeptic. I don't believe there's no such thing as a free market. I believe that the difference between capitalism and Marxism is that in a capitalist society, they hide the truth behind free market. In Marxist societies, in a state-planned economy, so Marxist societies are state-planned, capitalist societies are free market. Okay? And there are certain assumptions in capitalist societies and certain assumptions in Marxist societies. But anyway, we won't delve into this because this class doesn't teach political theory. But we'll move on. If I were to ask you to differentiate between Orientalism and Occidentalism, and I mentioned it earlier today, Orientalism refers to what? The Western representation and interpretation of Eastern cultures, often characterized by stereotypes, exoticism, and a sense of superiority. Occidentalism, conversely, involves the Eastern perspective and critique of Western culture, often highlighting imperialism, cultural hegemony, and negative aspects of Western civilization. So Orientalism refers to the West and what they believe and their interpretation about the East, while Occidentalism involves the Eastern perception and critique about the West. That's it. Okay. Where am I? Granted versus, we're going to wrap up in a couple of seconds. Granted versus taken freedoms. Granted versus taken freedoms. Granted freedoms are those rights and liberties bestowed upon individuals by authorities or institutions, often subject to conditions or limitations. That's granted. Like Jamaican independence, Haitian independence, Guyanese independence. Or and then there's as against taken freedoms. On the other hand, are rights that individuals assert and claim for themselves through resistance, like what the Haitian Revolution was a take, and which result in what in their societies today. Because and I said to you, what differentiates between, and if you look at the exam paper, I asked you what the difference between granted freedoms and taken freedoms, and then at the top I ask you what separates some Caribbean islands. There goes the answer. I make it easy for you guys, but I want you guys to, sometime within an exam paper, it's written with the answer right there, or it's written in such a way that if you follow the flow, some things answer other things, and sometimes the professor deliberately does it so to help you. Taken freedoms, on the other hand, are rights that individuals assert and claim for themselves through resistance. Like, say, for example, the Haitian Revolution, the American Revolution, okay, the Jamaican. So, say, for example, if you were to say to me, granted freedom, an example of granted freedom is the freedom that Haiti, that Jamaica got from the West Indies. That Jamaica got from Britain. As against taken freedom, which is what Haiti, an American Revolution. That's the difference between granted and taken. I don't need anything else. I don't need something very long. You can give me an example of granted and taken freedoms, and I'll accept that. CPI of 0 versus
CPI of 100. Let me ask, what's the difference between CPI of 0 and CPI of 100? And you know what CPI means, right? Corruption Perception Index of 0 as against 100. Jamaica, okay. And if I were to ask you, does Jamaica have a corruption perception index above 50? True or false? Jamaica's corruption index is above 50.
Sir, why didn't you just say that instead of CPA, the abbreviated version?
Because I want you guys to. No, it's already said. See. Wait, the exam paper doesn't have. Oh wait, it doesn't have that on the exam paper. Oh wow. Okay, you know why?
It's a CPI of 0 versus CPI of 100.
I did it deliberately. I want to see if you guys are reading and follow the class. If you were following my class last week and watched the videos and everything, then you would know that you would know what CPI means, Corruption Perception Index. 0 means you are dirty. 100 means you are clean. Remember, that's it. A corruption perception index of 0 means you are dirty. The closer you are to 0, the dirtier, the more corrupt country you are. The closer, the more you get away from 0 up to, the more, when you get to 100, the more you are. A corruption perception index of 100 means you are clean. Clean, very clean. Okay. So that's CPI of 0 as against CPI of 100. You want to get a CPI of 100. Okay. Or above 50. Jamaica's corruption perception index is, I think, it's 46. Or over between 40 and between 46 and 47. Between 44 and 46. And that's it for the first section of the exam. Now there are other sections of the other. Where is it? The other section says answer 3 questions. Why is it considered a myth by some academics of the subaltern that Haiti had once colonized the Dominican Republic? What separates Haiti and Cuba from other Caribbean islands? I would do question 2. Okay. I would do question 2. What is the difference between Afrocentrism and Eurocentrism? I asked that question again. So many times, I would do it again. Why is Obe considered evil? And what is the original purpose of voodoo and obia? Okay. So, just so you know, if I were, and these are short answer questions. If I were to ask you why is it considered a myth by some academics of the subaltern, and I should have asked you what the subaltern means. History from below. Of the subaltern that Haiti had once colonized the Dominican Republic. I should have asked what subaltern means. Oh my God. Anyway, some academics argue that the notion, and just so you know, anytime I set an exam, I sit the exam myself. I have the answers to every single one of these questions, and I'm reading from what I sat the exam myself. I'm telling you that, okay? To see how much time, how long it's going to take, and difficulty and so on. So I sat this exam. So I'm providing you with my answers. I set the exam myself as well. Based on what I did, I went back and watched all the videos and all the stuff that we've done. And then, so none of this I'm asking you is foreign. Why is it considered a myth? Some academics argue that the notion of Haiti colonizing the DR is a myth because it oversimplifies complex historical dynamics. Haiti and the Dominican Republic have had a tumultuous relationship marked by border disputes and power struggles, but labeling it as colonization overlooks the nuances of their shared history and the influences of external powers. Okay? The influences of external powers. We're talking about the Catholic Church and the Spanish, okay, who created the false notion for many years so as to sow a wedge between DR and Haiti, so that
their relationship can be shaky, and the Santo Domingo or Hispaniola can be unstable. Okay. What separates Haiti and Cuba? Haiti and Cuba stand out in the Caribbean due to their unique histories and anti-colonial resistance from social revolutions. Both countries experienced successful revolutions that led to significant political and social transformation, setting them apart from other Caribbean islands in terms of their revolutionary legacies and geopolitical positions. Okay. What is the difference between Afrocentrism and Eurocentrism? Afrocentrism emphasizes the contributions and perspectives of African cultures and peoples to human history and civilization, challenging the dominance of European perspectives, while Eurocentrism, on the other hand, centers on European cultures and histories as central to human progress and often marginalizes or ignores the contributions of non-European societies. So when the Jamaican government decided that they were going to begin discussing legalizing obeah, and many church people say, no, that's wrong, you can't do it, obeah is evil. I cannot believe that they said that. I cannot believe that. I was shocked that Jamaicans would say that, knowing Nanny of the Maroons. That was a Eurocentric position. These are Caribbean people, okay, who have been colonized and who have been implanted and embedded in their minds Eurocentrism, to the fact that they are now embracing Eurocentrism and calling obeah evil, which is just a Eurocentric position. Why is obeah considered evil, and what is the original purpose of voodoo and obeah? Obeah is often considered evil due to its association with practices that are perceived as harmful or manipulative, such as hexing, curses, and spell casting. This perception is influenced by colonial and Christian biases. Colonial and Christian biases that demonize Afro-Caribbean spiritual practices. However, the original purpose of obeah, like voodoo, was rooted in traditional African religious beliefs and practices aimed at healing, protection, and spiritual empowerment. These traditions served as a means of connecting with ancestral spirits, seeking guidance, and maintaining spiritual balance within the community. You understand that, guys? You got that?
Yes, sir. I'm here, sir. Yes, sir.
Great. I hope I am going to try and finish this because I'm going to record it and have it available. This video will be available as soon as possible. I have 1, 2, and then this video to release. So you will have this video available. If you watch it, you'll be able to pass the exam. And if you review all that we have done, you'll be able to pass the exam. Okay. For those who don't show up to class or leave early, I'm not going to reach out to anybody who will show up to class today. I'm telling you that. And I know people who come, if I'm telling you, I do not pass or fail students. Students pass and fail themselves. And there are 1 or 2 students, we only have 7 people in the class, and there are some students who never come to the class or who come very late and leave very early. I am telling you this, I'm going to keep that in mind when I'm grading these papers. And if, I remember some time ago, a student failed the communities, particularly the Rastafarian movement. Now, that's it's very important to passing this course. But anyways, let me continue to the 5th question. What socio-political condition gave rise to reggae as a religion and philosophy? Okay, reggae emerged in Jamaica during the late 1960s and 1970s. But actually, it started from the 1930s and 40s amidst a backdrop of sociopolitical upheaval and cultural ferment. The music served as a vehicle for expressing the struggles for aspirations of marginalized communities, particularly the Rastafarian movement. Now, Rastafari, which emerged as a social religious movement in Jamaica, promoted messages of liberation, African pride, and resistance to oppression
which became central themes in reggae music. Now, the socio-political conditions of economic inequality and racial discrimination and political unrest in Jamaica provided fertile ground for the development of reggae as a form of cultural expression and social critique. Of course, many Rastafarians were against European and Eurocentric religions. They believe that had helped to create the condition of the black man, and so they believe that they cannot worship a God that has enslaved their peoples and them and continue to keep them down. So they created the Rastafari. I mean, what am I talking about? I'm talking about Rastafarianism. But reggae emerged. So I apologize. Rastafarianism started in the 1930s. Reggae is different. That started in the 1960s and 70s. I'm running ahead of myself. Sorry. Rastafarianism, which is the religion, started in the 1930s. Reggae, which is the music of Rasta, emerged in the 1960s and 70s. The Caribbean is said to be an invention. Who is credited with this? And do you agree? Well, the idea that the Caribbean is an invention can be attributed to Caribbean scholar Kamau Brathwaite, who argued that the region's identity and culture were constructed through a process of colonialism and creolization. Now, Brathwaite's concept of nation, language, and Thai dialectics emphasizes the hybridity and fluidity of Caribbean identity. Again, he argued that the Caribbean region's identity and culture were constructed through a process of colonialism from when the Europeans came to the shores, and of course, and what creolization in terms of our language and what extends from that. Of course, so Kamau Brathwaite said that, but please remember that Brian Meeks and Norman Gervin in the Caribbean Reader have also said the Caribbean is an invention. So if you say the Caribbean Reader, Norman Gervin, Brian Meeks in there talk about, then I'll accept that. If you said Kamau Brathwaite, I'll accept that. Okay. Whether one agree with this description of the Caribbean depends on their perspective on the region's history, identity, and cultural dynamics. Some may find Brathwaite's concept insightful in understanding the complexities of Caribbean identity, while others may view it as oversimplifying the region's diverse cultural landscape. I don't believe it's oversimplifying anything, okay? Because I believe that it is not oversimplifying it, but it is actually part of the historical evolution of the Caribbean. And to understand the Caribbean is to also understand its simplicity and its complexity. Section C. Of course, Section C is going to ask you to. Section C is going to ask you about. Is going to ask you what major works are For the Following known for. Sailor James, Walter Rodney, Homie Barber, Franz Fanon, Bob Marley, Eddie, Garnet Roper, and just so you know, C.L.R. James is known for his works like The Black Jacobins, and he was a Marxist historian and political theorist. We talked about him earlier. I don't have to go through it. His major contribution lies in his analysis of the Haitian Revolution, highlighting the agency of enslaved Africans in their struggle for liberation. James's work emphasized the importance of class struggle and revolutionary movements in shaping Caribbean history and politics. Walter Rodney, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, is a seminal work in post-colonial studies. Rodney's Marxist analysis, of course, he was Marxist, but he was influenced by Karl Marx, and his Marxist analysis exposed the exploitative nature of European colonialism and its role in perpetuating underdevelopment in Africa and the Caribbean. His work inspired a generation of scholars and activists like myself to challenge colonial legacies and advocate for social justice and economic empowerment. Also, he influenced people like Garnet Roper, okay, Lewin Edwards as well, just so you know. Homi Bhabha. Homi Bhabha, post-colonial theorist, known for his concept of cultural hybridity. Talk about hybrid, we talk about mixture, cultural mixture, and he came up with the term the cosmopolitan, and how the cosmopolitan, the post-colonial subject, who is from the global south, leaves and goes to the global north. Who is he, and who is he? Who is he in the global north? Who is he in the global south? And how he is evolving, and who he is evolving into, and how he is represented and accepted by his own countrymen within and those without. Okay, so cultural hybridity, and you should be able to define cultural hybridity, culture speaking to a way of life of a people, hybridity who have been colonized but still keep their Creole cultures and Afro traditions. Cultural hybridity is talking about the mixture and the influence of the post-colonial subject and his identity, his culture. Okay, so Homi Bhabha, post-colonial theorist, is known for his concept of cultural hybridity and his critiques of colonial discourse. Now, his work emphasizes the complexities of cultural identity and the ways in which colonized peoples negotiate their identities in relation to dominant colonial narratives. I'm going to say this again. His work emphasizes the complexities of cultural identity and the ways in which colonized peoples negotiate their identities in relation to dominant colonial narrative. Just so you know, what are we talking about? Talk about the cosmopolitan. Talk about the cosmopolitan. Remember, we talk about the cosmopolitanism and who the cosmopolitan is. We talk about the periphery and the center, or the traditional and the non-traditional, and how the traditional imposes itself on the non-traditional, and how the peoples of the non-traditional, when they are in the traditional, how that affects their view of all things. And then, of course, Homi Bhabha talks about the work of the psychoanalytic theorist Frantz Fanon, who helps to remove our tainted eyes. Yes? Anyways, but Bhabha's ideas have influenced debates on multiculturalism, globalization, and identity politics. Frantz Fanon is the last one. He talks about the wretched of the earth. He wrote the book Wretched of the Earth, which is a foundational text. And Homi Bhabha wrote The Location of Culture. Frantz Fanon wrote The Wretched of the Earth and Blackskin's White Mask. The Wretched of the Earth is a foundational text in post-colonial theory and decolonization movements. Fanon's work explores the psychological effects. So if you are studying counseling and psychology, this you want to take this guy's book and read it. Frantz Fanon explores the psychological effects of colonialism or colonization on both the colonizer, the white man, and the colonized, the black man, the black and brown people, advocating for a revolutionary violence as a means of liberation from colonial oppression. And the kind of violence he's talking about is not necessarily a physical one, but it's a one in terms of our principles, our methods, and our languages, our psychology, our psychoanalysis, and how we analyze. His analysis of the dynamics of power and resistance continues to resonate in contemporary struggles for justice and self-determination. Of course, there are others. There's Bob Marley, Edith Clark was a Caribbean American forget that. But Edith Clark, Garnet Roper, but there's Edith Clark. And then we won't do any more. But section D, the final section. And I'm going to end with this section by sharing with you one essay that I'm going to lift up. Should theology transcend culture? Write one essay, 2 to 3 pages. Sorry. Yeah, 2 pages. No. 2 pages is enough. Write an essay arguing whether or not you believe, double space, that theology should or should not transcend culture. In your essay, and let me just bring it up. Write an essay on one of the following. It's worth 30 marks. So I don't want one paragraph. I don't want 2 paragraphs. I don't want 3. I want at least 6 paragraphs. Okay. And when you do this, when you when the question, these are the questions. And this is what I would like you to do. I want you to, if you were to do question 1, should theology transcend culture? You want to define theology and culture. Okay. So in your essay, you want to explore the following points. If you're asked to write an essay, should theology transcend culture? You want to define theology and culture first, in the first paragraphs. You want to then explore historical and contemporary examples of the intersection of theology and culture. Okay. Then you want to provide arguments for and against the transcendence of theology over culture. And then towards the end, you want to suggest implications of either positions for religious practice, identity formation, and social cohesion. So if I ask you to write the essay, should theology transcend culture? I have written an essay before, and I think this is part of an essay. I've written an essay on this too, but you can write your own essay. This could be your essay, but this would be my response. I would respond like this. The relationship between theology and culture is a complex and multifaceted one, with scholars and practitioners offering differing perspectives on whether theology should transcend culture or be deeply embedded within it. To address this question, it is essential to define theology and culture and explore their interplay in both historical and contemporary contexts. And for those of us who are joining us, welcome. We're looking at an essay question, and we're wrapping up Caribbean theology class. This is the final 5 minutes, and then I wrap up. Okay, so the first paragraph, you saw what I did? Again, the relationship between theology and culture is a complex and multifaceted one, with scholars and practitioners offering different perspectives on whether theology should transcend culture or be deeply embedded within it. To address this question, it is essential to define theology and culture and explore their interplay in both historical and contemporary contexts. Theology at its core is the study of the divine, religious beliefs, and the nature of the divine being or beings. It encompasses doctrines, rituals, ethics, and interpretations of sacred texts within various religious traditions. Culture, on the other hand, refers to the shared beliefs, values, customs, and practices of a particular group of people, often shaped by factors such as history, geography, language, and social structures. Throughout history, theology and culture have been intertwined, influencing and shaping each other in profound ways. Religious beliefs and practices are often deeply embedded within cultural contexts, reflecting the values, norms, and traditions of a society. Conversely, theology has also played a role in shaping culture, providing frameworks for understanding the world, guiding ethical behavior, and fostering community cohesion. However, the question of whether theology should transcend culture raises important considerations regarding the universality of religious truth claims and the diversity of human experiences and perspectives. Proponents of the transcendence of theology. So again, I'm saying to you, let me say this again. The question of whether theology should transcend culture raises important considerations regarding the universality of religious truth claims and the diversity of human experiences and perspectives. In fact, depending on your position, your theological position, in other words, how you perceive God or how you do your theology, okay? And by that, I'm talking about a more humanist liberation theological perspective provides something else. Sorry, let me correct this. Are you looking at, do you approach theology from top down or from the bottom up? Proponents of the transcendence of theology argue that religious truths are universal and transcendent. A lot of Orthodox Christians, conservative, traditional theologians and thinkers, their theology is more from the top-down approach, a transcendence, a theology devoid of the humanity. Or if you were to study Christology, the theology of Christ, and they ask you what kind of, is it a transcendent one or a humanistic one? But proponents of the transcendence of theology argue that religious truths are universal and transcendent. Transcendent. To transcend something is to go beyond. Okay? Transcendent and applicable to all people regardless of cultural context. Transcendence theology. But I agree that general theology is applicable regardless of cultural context. I agree to an extent if you are looking at theology generally. But we have a theology that has been institutionalized and denominationalized. So if theology is institutionalized and denominationalized, and we know that Michel Foucault, influenced by Kant, have argued that history as a result, influenced by Kant, who have said history is a result of the varieties of human natures and circumstances, and Michel Foucault, who is skeptical of institutions, saying that institutions help to preserve a particular knowledge that preserves the status quo and the dominance. Okay, so then therefore, this is where I take my departure. Okay, because we have the theologies that we have today, they are institutional and they're categorical. And also inherited, and not only that, and cultural, to be honest. When you start to study Judaism and the Torah, okay, and then you start to study various cultures and their religions, or various religions and how they have come to emanate. They are not divorced from the people. But the Caribbean being an invention from the European brought with them their theology. A theology which is Western, which has been influenced over time through Roman, Greek, German, so on and so forth. But proponents of the transcendence of theology argue that religious truths are universal and transcendent, applicable to all regardless of cultural context. They posit that theology should provide timeless principles and moral guidance that are not bound by cultural limitations. I disagree. To the extent that the theology we have today is the theology, theologies are institutional. If you're talking about general theology, is one thing. But you're talking about theology that is institutional, which majority of our theology of God is based on a particular perspective, couched in a particular category of Christianity, Muslim, or whatever the case. And even within Christianity, there's denominational Christianity, there's denominational theology. Because the theology of the Brethren Church is different from the theology
of the United Church in Jamaica and the Cayman Islands, and it's different from the Council for Work, and it's different from the missionary church in Jamaica. So then, how can theology transcend culture? Unless we're talking about a theology that is speaking about the general understanding of God, devoid of any institutionalized concept or catechisms. They posit that theology should provide timeless principles. Now, on the other hand, advocates of the embeddedness of theology within culture emphasize the importance of contextualization and cultural relevance in religious practice and interpretation. They argue that theology must be understood and expressed within the cultural frameworks of particular communities, taking into account their unique histories, language, and worldviews. Because when you study the Torah or Judaism, that's what it is. Okay? It involved a way of life of a people in terms of how they wash themselves and how they clean. But now later on, men have interpreted that to mean how you must be clean. So now some churches say you have to be circumcised. No. Circumcision is what the Jews did, and that defined them as a people, okay? And then their cultural leaders wanted everybody to do it, so they apply what was the authority of the day? God, and said, this is what God expects of us, okay? This is what God expects of us. But they were using the understanding or using the authority of God. We talk about so appealing. Okay, I don't know if you guys study. Fallacies, and pseudo appeals, like false appeals to associations, say for example, and logic and so on, fallacies. And they are, if you want, before the scientific revolution, if you wanted to entrench and to establish your authority, which is what the monarchs did, you appealed to God. Now, after the scientific revolution, you want to establish a position, you appeal to science. Okay? With some amount of God in it still. But they remove God and put science as the arbiter of truth because it served the status quo. It served the dominant class, or what they were about to do. Okay? Because science, okay, I won't get into that too much. So it's very important. Circumcision is a cultural practice. It has nothing to do with godliness. Okay? It's a cultural practice of a particular set of people called the Jews or the Hebrews. That's what they did, and that's what they expect all Jews to do. All Jews were to do that. That was part of their culture. And not only that, and that was part of a society that was just developing, where you have to wash and keep yourself clean. And in those societies that did not have certain kind of hygienic techniques and so on, the way how people clean themselves now is different then. And so there are some things that they had to do then that you don't have to do now because of what we know and the techniques we now use. Okay? Part of their culture, you don't put parapet on your house. Yes? Part of their, so I mean, what we are talking about as doctrine is not doctrine or theology, it's culture. It's an expectation in terms of the practices of the people, and which define them, which make them Jews, which make them Hebrew. I tell people, I'm not Hebrew, and I'm not Jew. I'm not. Okay? I am not Hebrew, and I'm not Jew. Okay? I tell people that sometimes. But let me continue to say it. But anyways, so people who are against the transcend, who are more for the embeddedness of theology within culture, emphasize the importance of contextualization and cultural relevance in religious practice and interpretation. They argue that theology must be understood and expressed within the cultural framework of particular communities, like the Jews and the Hebrews. But if within in the Caribbean and you read our Bible, and the Gentiles' Bible, it also have Judaism. Just so you know, Jesus had a problem trying to prove to the traditionalists why the Gentiles are also Christians or accepted by God. They're not Jews, but they're accepted by God because they believe in me. So you have Jews for Jesus and Jews not for Jesus. But there was a change in tradition, and some Jews would say, no, they are not Jews. They can't be Jews. No, he said, no, they can't be Jews because now they are my brothers. Okay, they are now my brothers. They are now my sisters. Okay, if they are my brothers and they are my sisters, then they are Jews. They don't have to be born a Jew. They don't have to be circumcised to be a Jew. They don't have to follow all those cultural things to be a Jew, because those cultural things are just cultural. Okay, they don't have to do all that to be a Jew. They just need to be. It's as if a marriage. I get married to somebody, I know I'm no part of that family based on the legal requirement that I have fulfilled. Okay. The legal requirement for the Gentile was to believe in Jesus, who is a Jew. In order to be a Jew, you have to believe in Jesus. As a Gentile, in order to be a Jew or to be accepted by God in the Jewish way, or to be part of that community or culture, then you don't need to do what the Jews do, except that you need to first accept Jesus. So when you saw the acceptance of Jesus Christ was the legal requirement for those who weren't born Jews, who were born Gentiles, to become Jews. And then the Jews privileged their position because Jews was the in thing. Everybody wanted to be American. Everybody wanted to be a Jew. You wanted to be a Jew. Jew was the in thing back then, and the Jews wanted to make sure that that's the in thing. But over time, there was fierce competition, and later on, those Jews for Jesus, those Jews who became Jews by believing in Jesus, they became more popular and dominant and became useful to the power brokers of the day. Okay? And I want you to understand what I'm saying. In order for you to be a Jew, in order to become part of the culture and the Bible, and the New Testament, if you look at the context, the location of the New Testament, where is Christianity being developed? Where is all of these activities happening? It's happening in Jerusalem. It's happening in Jewish country. And if I'm a Gentile living in Jerusalem and living all over these areas that was heavy, like had a lot of Jews, and the Jews used to carry the weight. The Jews were the tax collectors. The Jews were the teachers. Everybody wanted to be a Jew, but nobody could be a Jew. Everybody wanted to come to the U.S., but everybody could not come to the U.S. But Jesus made a way, because you know why? Jesus believed in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So he said, fine, okay, we are not going to discriminate against these people, because since everybody have to be a Jew, and Jew was the high mark, so then he said, I accept them and they accept me. So now they are Jews. We can't treat them differently. We have to treat them now like brothers and sisters. You have to treat them like your brothers and sisters now. You can't treat them like they are different. Okay? But some people wanted to preserve the Jewish culture. They didn't want to share. They didn't want everybody, because if everybody become Jew, then they will lose their privilege. They will lose their dominance. Okay? If everybody is rich, then nobody is rich. You understand what I'm trying to say here? If everybody is rich, that's a problem. Okay? In society, in order for people to maintain their dominance, some people must have more of the wealth. So that's why I said to you, economic principle, which studies the allocation of resources amongst unlimited ones but limited resources, that is a lie. Okay? That is a lie. Or they have utilized a distributive mechanism that favors the few over the many, but yet say it's based on fair competition, when competition is not free, when you start to study structural adjustment and how they have made Caribbean into dependent capitalist countries. But I'm talking about this particular question here, theology. So if you believe in then you are all Jews. If you want to be part of the Trump family, and if you marry Trump daughter, then you become Trump. Or you bear my name. Once you marry into my family and believe in me, you bear my name. And now you are now part of it. So that was important to Jesus. What is important to Jesus was that all of these Gentiles and all of these people who were said to be irreligious, that they become part, or not religious, or not Jewish, and treated as scum and so on and so forth. That they become, and they said the Jews and the Samaritans had no dealings. But if they believe on Jesus, then they become, that means they're literally marrying into the religion. They now become Jesus. They now become Jews. So and then you have Jews for Jesus and Jews not for Jesus. Okay? And then you start about, but the problem is, you don't want everybody to become Jews. And so now Jews was based on birth. But Jesus came and changed that and said, no, anybody can be a Jew. Anybody can be accepted as part of the Jewish community, the Jewish culture, not necessarily the Jewish faith, but the Jewish culture. Once you become part of you're accepted as part of the Jewish community, then you will get the benefits of the Jewish faith. The Jews privilege themselves. And not only that, and their God is the best God. And everybody was but you can't be a Jew. Okay, you can't get the benefits that my God can give you. You have to become a Jew first. So Jesus said, okay, I'm gonna fix that. He created a way where, by developing followers who follow him, by becoming brothers, they can become part of that Jewish community and culture, and by virtue of being part of becoming a Jewish community and becoming part of the Jewish brotherhood, now they can now get the benefits. They can now claim the benefits that the Jews have. That is when you start to study history. So what is Ronaldo talking about? Oh my God, he's a heretic. I'm not a heretic, guys. Okay, I am presenting, when you start to study the foundations of knowledge and the hegemony of faith, you start to really delve into the history of all things. So this approach acknowledges, so people like myself who believe in the embeddedness, who more look, probably they're saying that instead of the transcendence, by the way, it's called immanence. The immanence. Transcendence versus the immanence. On the other hand, advocates of the embeddedness of theology call we talk about this, the immanence, looking at God from the immanence of God within culture, emphasize the importance of contextualization and cultural relevance in religious practice and interpretation. They argue that theology must be understood and expressed within the cultural frameworks of particular communities, taking into account their unique histories, languages, and worldviews. So later on, Christians, I have new Christians who now start to say, I don't have to be a Jew. I don't accept it. I don't have to accept. Okay, I don't have to. And even some Christians after the first 100 years of Christianity, in the early development of Christianity, there are some Christians who practice the circumcision. That not many persons practice the circumcision. And there were some people who were forcing Jesus to force his followers to do some of the things that the other Jews were doing. He said, fine, if they are Jew, then they gotta do this. They have to circumcise. If they are Jew, they have to. How come they're not circumcised, Jesus? They attacked and confronted Jesus about this. Okay, they're not following. They can't be part of the Jewish community, and therefore get the benefits of God if they don't do everything that a Jew do. Okay, if they're gonna follow you and so on and so forth. Remember, it's all about being accepted in not the Jewish faith, but the Jewish community and the Jewish brotherhood, because the Jews were first a people who have a particular way of a system of worship So those who advocate for the embeddedness of theology, they argue that theology must be understood and expressed within the cultural frameworks of particular communities, taking into account their unique histories, languages, and worldviews. This approach acknowledges the diversity of human experiences and the dynamic nature of culture, allowing theology to evolve and adapt to changing social contexts. So yes, Christianity was started as a way to broaden the olive branch. And people think that the olive branch is talking about not the faith, the Jewish community. So that if other people want to be Jew, they should be a Jew. They don't have to be born into the faith to be part of the Jewish community and the Jewish community of brotherhood. This has to be another way. If they follow our community standards, then they should be accepted. If they follow our way of life, and if they believe on me, if they believe on me and I'm part of you, then now they are part of you too. So we are part. So Christians and Jews are supposed to be part of the same community. Okay, the community in the sense that because we embrace Jesus, then we are now part of the community. That was the idea, to be part of the Jewish community, which was the ideal at the time. This approach acknowledges the diversity of human experiences, the dynamic of nature of culture, allowing theology to evolve. Now, I'm going to wrap up at 2 minutes and then I'm done. Furthermore, the transcendence of theology over culture can lead to imposition of dominant cultural norms and values on marginalized communities, perpetuating systems of power and inequality. Again, the transcendence of theology over culture can lead to the imposition of dominant cultural norms and values onto marginalized communities, perpetuating systems of power and inequality. And I've argued that in the second book coming up, because there are some people there, because of the religious stance that they have taken, it locks them into certain decision making, much to the benefit of the post-colonials and the post-colonial masters who have passed on their religion to them, because that's great. Jamaican tourism can't compete with some other countries' tourism because they don't use, there are some things that Jamaicans will do and will not do that will, based on their Christian traditions. Okay, and so that's what we're talking about. So embracing cultural diversity within theology fosters inclusivity, allowing for the voices and perspective of marginalized groups to be heard and valued within religious discourse. This is my conclusion. In conclusion, we talk about they're having a symposium tomorrow about how do we address crime and violence, embracing cultural diversity, a Caribbean theology that embraces cultural diversity within theology, fosters inclusivity, allowing for the voices and perspectives of marginalized groups to be heard and valued within religious discourse. That is how we respond. In conclusion, the relationship between theology and culture is a dynamic and complex one, with both perspectives offering valuable insights into the nature of religious belief and practice. While some argue for the transcendence of theology over culture, emphasizing universal truths and principles, others advocate for the embeddedness of theology, we call it immanence of God, as against the transcendence of God. Others advocate for the immanence of God, the embeddedness of theology within culture, acknowledging the diversity of human experiences and the importance of cultural context. Ultimately, the challenge lies in finding a balance between these perspectives, recognizing the universality of religious truths while respecting the diversity of cultural expressions and interpretations. And that's the end. And by the way, I have written, I have written all of this. That's it for class. Thank you, guys. Chanel Hall is here. Welcome aboard, Chanel. I don't know what happened to Alan. He didn't come to class.
Okay,
today.
and you will stop.
He's not in class today. I don't know what's going on. Anybody know what happened to Alan? Why did he make it?
Stop share.
But thank you, guys.
I don't know what happened to Adam. I'm not sure.
But thank you guys for making it Caribbean fun. And this is the last class until the
Well, okay, let me stop that quickly. Hold on,
this
guys.
this class was this class didn't have a lot of people this year. I mean, over the past couple of semesters I've taught, we've had 10, 15, 18, 25.
And that's it. And we will stop there. All right, guys. And that's it for class. But for summer semester, how are you guys? How are you feeling? Ready? Going into the exam?
Somewhat, sir. Somewhat.
Very good. Did you like that that presentation just now going over that quiz? How was it? Was it clear?
You know, sir.
Good, good. But guess what? You guys don't have the exam until the 16th. They give you guys until the 16th. So you have a lot of time to prepare and to get. Yeah.
12, sir?
Go ahead.
Is it the 16 or the 12?
Sure, well, it's the Monday. What is it, Monday, right? It's the Monday. It's the Monday. It's a Monday. It's gonna be a Monday. Well, it's not really this. I mean, it's that first week, but I think it's the first day of exams. You guys have exams for this class. But I'll check the schedule again and see. But I believe it's the first week of exams. You guys have exams on Monday. And I hope you guys will do very well. You will have to pass the exam to pass the course. I believe you guys are ready. I will continue to send you some more stuff to prepare you for the exam. This particular class will be available. All the questions come from our discussions with the quiz, with what we've discussed in this class, and with the group presentations. That's where a lot of the quiz will come from. Let me